Welcome back to Firstline. Officials from Russia, Ukraine, France and Germany are holding meetings this week in an attempt to agree on a peace plan for eastern Ukraine. But before that, German Chancellor Angela Merkel has met with Barack Obama in the US, where the situation in eastern Ukraine was high on the agenda. For more on the situation, we're joined now by Professor Robert Patman from the University of Otago. Good morning, Professor.
Good morning, Michael.
Now,
Good morning, Michael.
We've just heard the latest news that Obama has come out to say that if diplomacy does fail, then they will consider supplying more arms to the Ukraine army. What do you think the strategy is of Obama and Merkel towards Ukraine and Putin?
Well, I think the strategy between the Europeans and the Americans is to apply maximum pressure. I think they both would prefer, that's the Americans and the Europeans, would prefer a diplomatic settlement, and they're trying to revive the Minsk agreement, which was signed in September last year, but which has fallen into abeyance with renewed fighting. Because the Obama administration is under a lot of pressure from senior Republicans like John McCain, Lindsey Graham, who are insisting that Americans should arm the Ukrainian government to extract a greater price for the Russians and the rebels in their activities in the eastern part of the country. But I think what's happening, the negotiations are a crucial point. And I think what the Americans are doing is signalling to Putin, if you do not sign this deal with Angela Merkel, who's in Washington at the moment, and also Francois Hollande, the French leader, these are the two who've taken the initiative with Putin to try and bring together a deal. If he doesn't sign it, he knows that the costs of his involvement, that's Mr. Putin's involvement in Ukraine, are likely to escalate. And of course, critics or the people who oppose the arming of the Ukrainian government argue that Mr. Putin will simply escalate the crisis in response.
And is that likely? That at the moment, he has really just been escalating it, hasn't he?
He has, yes. Difficult to judge. But I think Mr. Putin has already paid a horrendous price, a price which has been widely understated in the West. I mean, more than $130 billion worth of capital left the country last year, Michael. The Russian government is expending huge amounts of money defending the ruble, which is under enormous pressure. And also, there's going to be zero growth in Russia this year. And he's facing the Putin government is facing a looming economic crisis. So he's already paid a very big price. And of course, I'd be surprised if he can sustain that sort of commitment too long.
Putin's talked about preliminary issues needing to be solved first before there can be any progress. Do you know what he means by that?
I think he's referring to the mechanism in place for enforcing any peace agreement that might be reached. And the Poroshenko government in Ukraine, which is of course facing the eastern rebels, are worried about any peacekeeping mechanism which the Russians are involved in. You see, many of the countries of Eastern Europe, including Ukraine, have memories of Russian domination. And the way they're interpreting Russian support for the rebels in the East is an attempt to resurrect the sort of dominance that the old Soviet Union had in Eastern Europe. And so they're very worried about international mechanisms put in place to maintain the ceasefire.
How worried are you that this things could spiral out of control here and you could end up with a war between NATO and Russia?
Well, I don't think it will be war between NATO and Russia. I don't think we should inflate Russia's position. It's a regional power with nuclear weapons. Its economy is in a terrible state. And Mr. Putin's also playing a bit of a game of bluff here. He's muzzled his media, so he's not getting too much criticism at home for the dreadful state of the economy in Russia at the moment. But how long can he keep this up? Many people who've supported Putin amongst the Russian elite are deeply concerned about policies which are diplomatically isolating Russia and effectively hitting the long-term interests of the Russian economy and society.
OK, thanks very much for your time there. Professor Robert Patman there from Otago University.